Whenever I view people with low standards or what I would consider low standards, I'm just like, you look like you're living your life on easy mode. Like, you look like you truly have no worries, no cares in the world. And here I am, like, I'm so nitpicky about every single thing. Like, I like things the way that I like them. Like, I have these standards for myself. And I'm just like, it makes my life harder, which is why I titled the video, Having Low Standards Makes Your Life Easier. When I hear that personally, I'm just like, what? But if you think about it, in some aspects of life, it does. And that's what I want to speak about. Whenever I think about having low standards, if somebody was to tell me that I seem like the person who has low standards, I would be insulted immediately. But when I truly think about it, having low standards is not inherently actually an insult. I feel like having low standards is kind of like a mentality. Having low standards is a characteristic. It doesn't define your whole being unless you allow it to define your whole being. It may be true about one aspect or many aspects of one's life. It doesn't mean that they're a low value human being, okay? In the same way of having high standards, because the opposite is true. If I'm saying having low standards makes your life easier, then I can say having high standards makes your life harder. Keyword, easier, harder. I never said it makes your life easy, period. No struggles, nothing at all. And I'll actually get into what I mean by that exactly. Because even though I say that, that doesn't mean I'm ever gonna allow myself to have low standards in the parts of my life that I truly care about. But finally, here is what I mean when I say having low standards makes your life easier. It's not the being or the state of having those low standards that make your life easier itself. It's the fact that when somebody has a lot of low standards or, doesn't care too much, the level or the bar of what they'll accept in their life is low. They don't think about things too hard. They don't care about it too much. They're willing to accept more in comparison to somebody with higher standards. And when I say willing to accept more, I mean they're willing to accept their baseline along with everything above it. But when you have an elevated baseline, for instance, somebody with higher standards, you're not willing to accept what's under here. You need this or at least higher, which is why you're willing to accept more. Because the more doesn't come in the quality of it, it comes in the quantity of it. And I need to preface this. I think having low standards is only making life easier in the short term. I think it's very nuanced because standards are subjective. Something that one person may deem as, a top quality meal, maybe something else that somebody else deems as a low quality meal. And I think it's nuanced because it can be defined by your socioeconomic status, it can be defined by your class, it can be defined by your upbringing and what you constitute as something that's higher tier versus lower tier. I understand them because if you haven't experienced better, of course, you kind of don't know better. You don't know it for yourself. You don't know what it feels like to have or possess whatever higher quality or whatever more desirable outcome that maybe you would prefer. So since you haven't experienced it, can you truly desire it? Which is why I feel like people are so willing to accept less, because of the fact that they haven't experienced more. I feel like when you get to a place of experiencing the lifestyle you want to live, depending on your drive, depending on your strong will, you will do what you can to maintain that or even to reach more. But that's why having high standards comes at a cost in some instances. Because if all things are considered equal, if everybody started at the same baseline and we're trying to work our way up, in order for you to work your way up, all things considered equal, if there were no socioeconomic statuses, if there were no class, if there are no systemic issues or systems engraved in our society in which, differs the playing field, which makes it difficult for some people to achieve a certain status or standard of life that other people may be able to achieve more easily, or it's more readily available to them. But if all things were considered equal, then having low standards, I don't think would be as much of a baseline for some people. I think having high standards, what makes it difficult in that instance is because then it really takes your own drive. It really takes, how unhappy am I with my current state and what am I willing to do about it? I actually think that's the key question. What are you willing to do about it? How much energy, effort are you willing to exert to do something about your situation and to change it in the cases where that's possible? Because life is not peace and love, kumbaya, rainbows, and sunshine. Much more work is going to have to be made by some of us in order to get the life that we want to live, me included. I'm Black and I'm a woman. So much more work is going to have to be put into it. Unfortunately, it's my choice. Am I willing to let that scare me? Or am I willing to go through the hard things? So the low standards themselves don't make your quality of life easier. It's the mentality. I feel like with low standards, your ability to cope with maybe subpar or not the best circumstances, it's what makes life simpler for people who possess a lot of low standards because of the fact that they're willing to accept it. Intrinsically, somebody I would describe as one with low standards does not possess the inner turmoil or distress that comes from whatever standards or whatever reality they're currently living in. And they don't possess enough drive in order to have the desire to change that, have the desire to do the necessary things to get out of that. And as I said, this is if all things were considered equal. This was if it was just as simple as hard work gets you out of whatever situation, because that's not true. All things are not considered equal in the world that we live in. And I recognize that. I'm somebody who lives that actually. I really think it's like when it comes to low standards, it's about the ability to cope. If you accept low standards in your life, it's like you just have a greater capacity to cope with subpar circumstances. But in the long term, it may not be as fruitful as somebody with high standards or as somebody who has a greater level or expectation for the things that they want in their life. It may not be as fruitful. And it's so funny I say this because I constitute myself as somebody who has high standards. And I say this all the time. Like, I think hard against my will. And I always look at it. I'm like, people who don't think this hard, they have life on easy mode. Because it's like, they don't worry as much because to them, there's nothing to worry about. This is the first time I'm ever referencing a real philosopher since I've changed my podcast name. So this is so excited. But when I was thinking about this, I actually thought about this quote and I had to research it because I didn't know what it was exactly. But basically, there's a quote by Socrates, and basically it's, the more I know, the more I realize that I know nothing. This fits exactly into what I'm saying when it comes to low standards and high standards. And of course, there's exceptions. Of course, there's people who have maybe experienced the quality of life that they would prefer, although their willingness to achieve that is subpar. It's kind of like when you're a child and you don't know any better. Like, you just know the world that your parents give you. Your expectations and your standards most likely form around that time. And I'm just speaking in a way of like my own observations. I haven't done any research about this. As I said, my podcast is a 19-year-old girl talking about what she wants. So when you're a child, I feel like that's really like the foundation of what you're willing to accept, because it's kind of when the world tells you what to accept. It's kind of when your circumstances, the people in your life instill into you like this ceiling of what you can reach, even though there's not really a ceiling. The ceiling it doesn't exist, The ceiling is more subconscious. In my life, I'm not even saying I'm somebody who has high standards all the time, but the reason I even think this way is because of the fact that I've noticed in multiple periods, or I've noticed in multiple instances of my life where I'm just like, if I had lower standards, this would be easier for me. When it comes to selecting friends, I have a specific way I like to be treated. I have a specific way I like to feel. I like to feel like I'm being accepted. I like to feel like I'm being heard when it comes to my friends. And I feel like sometimes, and I've made an episode about this when it comes to palatability, People want somebody who's palatable. People want somebody who just goes along with things. And I'm not saying I'm a menace when it comes to friends. I think I'm pretty cool, but of course I think I'm cool on myself. I'm just saying I wouldn't constitute myself as somebody who's palatable. I'm actually a very strong-willed and multifaceted individual. So, there's things about me that are easier to handle than others. And like, I need friends who can accept that about me. So because of that, because I don't want to be made to feel a way about who I am as a person, and that's not because I lack willingness to grow as a person. It's just more so I've come to realize there's things about me that are non-negotiable. There's qualities about me that are truly intrinsically within me, and they cannot change in a month time span or whatever instance I first meet a person. Like, I can't be malleable, too malleable when it comes to certain values that I have, because they're intrinsically a part of me. I need to stand for something. I can't just change to everybody and shapeshift. That would be exhausting for me. And yes, I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to grow. There's things a part of me that it's like, if I can recognize this is an aspect about me that needs to change, I'm just like, I am very much willing to do that. But I'm saying this in a way of like, I don't want to be made to feel like I don't fit in. And because of the fact I don't fit in, I need to do something to change myself, versus those maybe just aren't the right people. And because I know that, and because I'm more so sure of myself and who I am as a person, it's why I have higher standards for friends. I want long-lasting relationships. When it comes to my friendships, and I think when it comes to having high standards, I care about the long-term outcomes. I'm willing to do the hard things right now in order to obtain what I want in the long term. I've said this before. I want my future aunts to my kids. I want my bridesmaids. I want my friends for life. Come on. Like, I don't want just acquaintances. Like, and people who it's like, oh, I used to know them X, Y, and Z, but like, there's no substantial connection that has lasted outside of that time period of our life. I don't mind having some of those people within my life. I don't mind having acquaintances, but to me, acquaintances and, people that I know but don't have deep connections to don't keep me going. And I actually think your standards are kind of go hand in hand with your values. A value of mine is deep, meaningful connections. I value having deep, meaningful connections. So as a result, I have a higher standard for my friendship because it's like, I kind of wasted time when I was younger. I've wasted time with, maybe like bending myself backwards or maybe entering into friendships in which I knew very well. Like, there's things that I'm like, maybe it's like a compatibility or an incompatibility in which won't allow it to work maybe to the extent that I would want it to, or have the longevity that I want it to. And I probably ignored that because my standards were low. I just wanted a friend. I just wanted somebody I can be like, this is my friend. I just wanted the title. I just wanted the concept of it. I didn't care about the quality of it. I'm saying that to say people who may have lower standards of friendship, they might have a lot of friends because of the fact that their definition of friendship isn't as deep as mine. And I'm not saying like mine is the one to covet. Not at all. You don't have to covet my definition of friendship. You can call whoever you want your friend. That's probably a more, social and a more like upbeat lifestyle. I just know why I am the way that I am, but everybody's different. But I'm just saying, somebody who may has low standards when it comes to their friend, they may not even know their friend's last name, but they're buddy with them all the time, cracking it up, telling them their secrets, all that. They have this perception of a close relationship because of the fact that their standards for what a close relationship should be aren't that high. It's like, I'm not even going to call you my friend if I don't know your last name. Like, no, you're an acquaintance, you're an associate, you're a colleague. If I don't know your last name, I'm not doing that because it's not about the last name. I don't want to get off topic. I just need to say this really quick. It's not about the last name. It's about what it indicates about how well you guys truly know each other, Anyways, so yeah, people with lower standards in the example of friendships, they don't care about the quality of the friends themselves. More so, they care about the concept of having friendship and having these relationships themselves. So that's just my view on it. When it comes to me, I care more so about the quality and how it makes me feel in which having quality friends in my life does. And I feel like that's kind of shaped by a little bit of my emotional unavailability. Okay? I have to admit, I'm a little emotionally unavailable only because of the fact that I've experienced, being too open and letting people into my life too easily, and that has hurt me. So it's like I've kind of become far on the other spectrum. I'm trying to get myself back into the middle ground, and I think I'm actually working towards that, and I'm proud of the progress I've been making. But anyways, it's not as easy for me. It truly is not as easy for me to call people my friend. Um, but I think honestly, the first step is realizing. The first step is being able to be aware of this about myself and being able to admit it. So, my point is having low standards doesn't make your life easier in the long term. It doesn't make your life easy, period. It may make your ability to cope with how your life is going and certain aspects of your life that are objectively unfavorable. It may make it easier to cope with that, but it doesn't make your life easy. If anything, I think having higher standards in the long term makes your life easier. It's a sacrifice in the short term for long-term gains. And that's kind of how I live my life. There's some instances in my life where I live in the moment. For instance, when it comes to having a sweet treat, sugar isn't good. Sugar makes me break out, but I love sweet things. So I will say sometimes I do have a lower standard when it comes to my diet or when it comes to filming my podcast. I love filming my podcast, actually. This is the best venture I've taken on, and it's the most spontaneous thing I've decided to do. But guess what? I film my podcast with my iPhone camera, usually in my car. I don't have a professional microphone, a professional camera, professional lighting. I don't even have a filming studio. Usually my car is the most conducive or quiet place in order to film a podcast. I received a comment on one of my posts about how sitting in my car and talking to my iPhone doesn't make my podcast a podcast. And when I received that, I had to giggle because you made it when you have hate comments. I had to giggle because it's like you're commenting on a you're commenting on a post with probably like 20 likes, and you're telling a 19-year-old girl about how she doesn't have podcast equipment in a studio. I'm in college. I have bigger priorities than this. The podcast isn't the end game. I'm trying to get my degree. I'm not investing my money into a studio and equipment. That's truly not my priorities. Anyways, to me, it's not financially smart right now. Like, this is a hobby. It's not like a career. But it's funny because it's like, it's true. I have low standards when it comes to the production quality. I'm not a big, what's up, YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Like, I truly know. I have a ring light, and that's all I'm investing in. That's all I'm investing in my $12 ring light from Walmart. I don't care. So, yes, I have low standards when it comes to that. But I feel like the things that I say and the content of my podcast is when my standards reach a high. Because I don't post every episode that I film. And I like to think about what I'm going to say in my podcast before I say it. I like to format it in a way that's engaging. So I care more so about the content or what I'm saying versus the production elements of it. So I have high standards on that part, but low standards on the other part. So, having low standards doesn't make you a low value human being. As I just admitted, I have low standards in some instances of my life, but that doesn't define me. I don't think any moment in your life where you choose to do one thing over another defines you. Have your low standards if you want to have your low standards, and have your high standards if you want to have your high standards. I just think it's important to realize how those correlate with your own personal values. I think it's important to realize at what cost.